Well, good evening, everyone, and Shabbat Shalom. Tonight's Torah portion is Tazria. Something to, again, force us to look at ourselves and our condition and where we are during this period of counting of the Omer. It's something that we should be doing, something that we should be aware of. So, Parsha Tazria starts in Vayikera 12 and goes through Vayikera 15. We're going to look at the core verse, and then we're going to discuss some components found in the Torah portion without necessarily reading the verses. I encourage you to read Vayikera, Leviticus, chapters 12 through 15, to get acquainted with what it says. But we're going to pull out some ideas for us to consider, especially now during this period of the counting of the Omer, this period of deep self-examination as we move towards Shavuot. So when we consider a Torah portion, we usually find that it's named after the first word of the Sidra. This, however, is not the case with Tazria. Let's consider the verse that contains the Torah portion of, or the name for Tazria, which is Vayikera, or Leviticus 12:2. And it says, "Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, If a woman be delivered and bear a man child, then she shall be unclean 7 days. As in the days of the impurity of her sickness shall she be unclean." So, what do we get? Okay, if a woman is pregnant and she gives birth to a boy baby, then she's going to be unclean 7 days, which makes sense. On the 8th day, he's going to be circumcised, and so, well, naturally the mother needs to be there. Nowadays, the mother is right there at the circumcision, and for breastfeeding mothers, the baby is circumcised and immediately given to the mother so that he can do his thing. So, very important day. So the mother would have to be clean to be there on the 8th day for the circumcision. But let's consider first the phrase Isha ki Tazria, when a woman be delivered. Why is the Torah portion not called Isha? Isha is the first of the words here. Isha means woman. Why does it begin with the word Tazria, meaning to be delivered? Why does the Torah portion use the name Tazria as opposed to the name Isha? Let's consider the phrase, "A woman be delivered and bear a man-child, then she shall be unclean 7 days." Again, we read it topically, we consider that a woman gives birth to a male baby. Okay? But let's consider it from another perspective. Say, the Torah is layered. It has depth. And when we consider the idea of Torah, the very word Torah means instruction. Something in this verse is telling us something that we need to be aware of on a deeper personal level in our relationship with our Elohim and our relationship to the world around us, with one another. So, can our spiritual condition, Isha, the woman, influence our worship, the man-child? Okay? Can our spiritual condition influence the way we worship, for better or for worse? Okay? Can it influence the way we view our relationship with our Elohim, or our relationship to one another? What is it that we have to do, or what is it that we have to take into account to consider in this? What do we have to take into account in our relationship with our Elohim. So, what is it that we deliver to the world around us or into our relationship with our Elohim? What do we deliver? What do people see? This is going to play a key role in this Torah portion of Tazria. When you read it, you'll find that there's a lot going on with leprosy. Okay? So, to answer this, we have to take into account the concept of she shall be unclean 7 days. Okay? Are we willing to understand what influences our belief, our morals, our ethics, whether we believe something to be true or untrue? This is the word for unclean is tameh. It means a lack of ethics, a lack of morals, believing something that is not true. Okay? So, are we bound by false assumptions that we need to be delivered from? And here's where the word 7 comes into play. The word for 7 is shaviat, that comes from the root shabah, that means to take an oath. So here we have an idea of to be bound to an oath, to be bound into or by something that we believe. Well, if we believe something that is unethical or something that is unmoral, or if we believe something that simply isn't true, then that is something that we must examine in our spiritual selves, because it will affect our physical action, our physical worship, our physical relationship, both to one another and to our Elohim. Okay? Are we bound by false assumptions that we need to be delivered from? Again, to what are we aligned to day to day? This is what sets us up to consider this Torah portion. When we looked at Parsha Shemini, we consider what was clean and unclean to eat, and we found within those animals there are deeper meanings and deeper reflections. For example, and I've used this example because it's one of the examples that means the most to me, and it's one of the examples that people step away from Christianity and they get into Messianic Judaism or whatever. They stop eating pork because in Parsha Shemini it says, "Don't eat the swine; it's unclean to you." And so we figure, okay, well, I'm not going to eat the BLT or the pulled pork sandwich anymore. But we consider, when we look at deeper portions, okay, and again, we're just looking at Shemini as kind of an example as to what influences us, what we take in. It says, don't eat the chazir. And now we use chazir as a word for pig, but chazir literally means to encapsulate. Don't eat something that encapsulates tameh. Tameh, again, don't consume things that encapsulate a lack of ethics, a lack of morals, a lack of truth. So we see that from a much deeper level of don't just stay away from bacon, right? So Shemini tells us to stay away from consuming certain things that will affect us spiritually and by proxy will affect us physically. All right? So Parsha Tazria, though, is where we read about leprosy, how it shows up as a small external spot. Now, again, we're not going to go into all of these verses about, if you come up with a white patch and it has hair on it, you need to show yourself to the priest, and the priest is going to isolate you for 7 days, and you come out, and if the patch is clean, then you're clean. But if the patch has got problems, then you have to isolate another 7 days. And if it doesn't change, well, then you're a leper and you have to go outside the camp. And this is what we read, okay? Let's consider what it means. How do we apply this? If this is Torah, then there has to be application for us to consider within this. So we're not going to look at these particular verses, but we're going to consider leprosy from a point of view that is what we show externally to the world around us. Okay? Tazria is talking about what we illustrate to the world around us. Leprosy was, and is, a serious disease that made the person contracting it unclean. So in Tazria, we consider what it is that we deliver to the world around us based on the worship that we allow our spiritual condition to influence. Okay? The person who was suspected of having leprosy would be placed in isolation again for 7 days before being inspected by the Kohen once again. So here we consider the idea of 7 days once again. What is it that we have aligned ourselves to? Okay? What is it that we align ourselves to and now show the world around us? Because that is ultimately what represents us. What people see is what they perceive that we are. What people see is what they perceive that we are not. Okay? So if we consider the idea of being isolated for a period of 7 days, we have to consider that we must consider what it is about us that we must change to keep us from becoming unclean and as such placed outside the camp. What is it about us that can separate us from a relationship with our Elohim? What is it about us that can cause us to be separated from the people around us? Have you ever met that kind of person that you'll talk to them, but you really don't want to be around them because they exude something that is just unpleasant? Is that something that we exude? What better time than this counting of the Omar to look at ourselves to find out if we are suffering from some type of leprosy? But again, let's consider the word Shabiot from the letters found within this. Remember, every letter in Hebrew has a meaning. It has something to say. And it begins with the letter Shin. Now we have, Shin has two sides. It has the front side and the back side. It represents for us 2 points of view. So Shin forces us to consider from which point of view we are being influenced by our own point of view, based on our perception, how we see things, our feelings, our emotions influence that, or are we looking at it from a point of view suggested in the Torah? Are we looking at it from a point of view that Elohim instructs us to look at things through? Okay? It's not a religious concept. We have a book that tells us, look, think about things from this point of view. Don't allow your emotions to impact you when you're considering things. So are we looking at it from our point of view or Elohim's point of view? The instruction of our Elohim. In this, we also have to take into account that it is the ayin, our perception, that keeps us in the house of our Elohim. There's the letter Beit. The ayin is between the Beit and the Tav. So it's our perception that keeps us in the house of our Elohim, within the camp, or separated from our Elohim. There's the Tav. The Tav is the furthest point from our Elohim. Okay? Leprosy, as a disease, affects the hands and the feet, causes the fingers and the toes to wither, and eventually they rot off. Eventually it affects the face. It causes the nose and the mouth to also wither and rot away. Eventually it begins to affect the internal organs, causing death. Leprosy is a state of external uncleanliness, and it suggests to us an idea of a type of pride that affects our ability to feel and to walk. Okay? To feel our fingers, our toes. It affects our ability to comprehend. And if it affects our ability to perceive, it affects our ability to walk the way we should be walking. Okay? Eventually, if we don't pay attention to it, if we don't set ourselves apart 7 days to examine what it is that we are actually aligned to, what is it that I have promised myself to, what is it that I have taken an oath to, if I don't resolve that and it affects my walk and the way I feel in an adverse manner, then we begin to die spiritually. The worst part about it is that we're never actually even aware that we are dying spiritually. Again, this is why the Torah is so important in events like this. We have to examine ourselves for leprosy. We must be willing to show ourselves to the Kohanim. In other words, we must be willing to teach ourselves, minister to ourselves, seek where we are, and if we need to make a course correction within ourselves. What better time to accomplish this? We took our oath at Pesach. We promised to be in a relationship at Pesach. We want to walk with our Elohim, being aware of his presence in our lives. How do we do that? Now we have this 50-day counting of the Omar that'll take us to Shavuot, to the next level of awareness of our relationship with our Elohim. So we can die spiritually. We can never even be aware if we don't take the time to look. So if we take this into account, then we can see why it's so important. The phrase, if a woman be delivered and bear a man child, she shall be unclean 7 days. We must be willing to examine ourselves spiritually before bringing our worship forward. Why do I believe what I believe? What is the origin of my belief? How does this affect my relationship with Yahuwah, my Elohim? How does this affect my relationship with the world around me? I must be aware. Okay? We have this period of time now to begin to look within ourselves and become aware. But we must be willing to know if we are aligned to something that has us in a state of uncleanliness. Then most importantly, we must be willing to change so that we remain in a state of connection with Yahuwah, our Elohim, and by proxy, in a good relationship with the world around us. So here is a question to ponder in this time of counting. What are you delivering to the world around you? Elohim asked that first question in the Torah, where are you? And this is what we must become aware of. So there is our Torah portion for tonight. I love you all, I miss you all, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye.